Hi again, everyone. I'm Ollie Matthews. This is Societal Narcissism. This video is a sponsored video, sponsored by Caroline for Homeschool Mom of One. And here's Homeschool's story. Ollie, I've been watching your videos for about 8 years now. You are one of the ones that are right on target with what's going on to us personally and societally. I want to tell my child's story to make people understand that teachers and schools aren't working for the child's best interest anymore. I'm going to give detailed examples why parents need to make the sacrifices to homeschool their children because the lines are drawn now, and whether or not you want your child to now know how to read, write, and do basic math skills, or be groomed sexually, or be conditioned to believe in something that is false when history proves different. However, I do believe now that schools don't follow special education laws on purpose so they can do what they want as far as the left's narrative goes. If you go against it, the borderlines come out of the woodwork. They will do anything to hide what they're doing or shut the parents up. Right, because you have a Marxist communist agenda now that has been taken, that it basically took over the schools 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Let me give you some background on our special needs child that is now an adult. He was born with some congenial defects that caused physical impairments and needed individualized education plan in school through special education. And listen, we had special education classes in my schools. It was one class where they put, no matter if you were like autistic, you had a physical disability, you were like mentally challenged. Um, Everybody went into one class. If you were just lazy, there were kids in there that didn't need to be in there. They were just lazy and didn't want to do their work. So it was just like this, just throw them all in one class and give them one teacher, and they can do whatever the frig they want in there. We used to call it romper room. That's what it was called. It was like you went to romper room. Anybody remember Romper Room? Was an old kid show back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, or if you're old enough, you remember Romper Room. This is a this is where our story begun with dealing with the public school system. Our child entered the school system in the fall of 2010 in kindergarten. Things went well in the first official year in school. However, we noticed that our child wasn't reading very well and having issues with decoding skills as well as some behavior issues related to the disabilities. A pre-screener for reading was given as a safeguard, but we did not get the results until the next year when I requested in writing for my child's educational records. I was shocked that all categories of the reading screener, state screener, was marked still developing. By the end of the year, our child wasn't reading at grade level or writing or doing letters, numbers, but he was given the citizenship award by the same teacher, even though he struggled with behavior, kind of like a participation trophy. This was in kindergarten. They started him reading. I didn't start reading until first grade. I didn't. Kindergarten was just basically, was playtime. My child's teacher's husband, by the way, at the time was the school superintendent. It is because we live in a small rural school district, so we are seeing some of the problem with nepotism and not to cause a problem for her husband. The next year came and the teacher was a second year teacher and was young female who I was told later had a drinking problem and would come to school hungover and made the kids do worksheets during those times. Well, again, we noticed, and it's funny. It's funny because you say that because I remember a day that my kindergarten teacher came in drunk, smelling a liquor. And I knew something was up because I'm like, Miss Nixon smells like mommy. And then she went into the bathroom and threw up all over the place. And then the principal came in, Mr. Rangers, and said, "Oh, Mrs. Nixon isn't feeling very well. And I'm like, and I told my mother, like, she smells like you. She's like, what do you mean she smells like me? I don't know, like when you drink. So I'm like, when you're drinking your juice in the in the fridge. She's like, what juice? And I pointed to it, the wine in the water bottles that my mom used to put. She's like, that's what Mrs. Nixon smelled like. I'm like, yeah. She's like, oh, she was drunk. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever that meant. Well, again, we noticed our child wasn't doing well reading and language arts and started to affect the math skills once again. No referral was made under child find, but the pre-screener was given, and we called a meeting with this teacher, and she looked right at both of us and stated that our child was doing just fine in her class, and they would try after school tutoring, which we agreed to because our child needed help. What she didn't disclose was the fact that they started the response to intervention, which is a tired intervention to help a child in general education to get caught up with their peers. We find out later that under the records requests, our child failed the RTI process, and after school tour tutoring and a meeting was called without us to discuss a referral to special education when I verbally requested on back in the beginning of the school year when we talked about after school tutoring. I always thought the parent was supposed to be part of the process or consent as far as education goes. Nope, wrong. Around this time, we started putting pressure on the school. Our child's teacher wasn't allowing our child to use the bathroom when he raised his hand. So what would happen is she would allow our child to have bathroom accidents and never called us to bring dry clothes. That happened to me too. One day she went in kindergarten. She wouldn't let me go to the bathroom. She's like, no, and I ended up peeing my pants. That was like the last day of school. And that's finally when my mother realized that there was the last day of school. The last day of school. Because she didn't call my mother when it happened. She told her after class, after school when my mother came to pick me up. And my mother knew because my mother had me out of diapers before I was like a year old. My mother he doesn't have accidents. He doesn't pee himself. What happened? Did he ask to go to the bathroom and you didn't let him? And she's like, well, we're doing something at the time, and then drunk he threatened to kill her. like it was the one time my mother I can remember, one of the few times I can remember my mother actually sticking up for me. And I think it's just only because my mother had the ability to have authority over somebody who was in authority. So it might not have so much been about me as it was about her. How I found out about this is that I was changing my child's clothes and I noticed the whole front of his clothes were wet, and because we didn't act or say anything in fear of retaliation, the same young female teacher. When Christmas break ended, we went up to the principal. At the time, we weren't aware of the fact that the school was under federal investigation for a violated child fine for not evaluation a child with a suspected disability. We told the principal that we requested back in October to have our child evaluated for special education, and it is now January and no word from the special education office. It wasn't a week when paperwork came out to fill out and a meeting was called to sign consent to evaluate. When the diagnostician that handled our child's evaluation in case was no better, she burned up a 60-day evaluation window, which now under Texas law is 45 days, and did only 25% of the testing, and the rest was done by observation or informally, which is against IDEA, special education law. Right. I mean, look, these public school teachers are checking boxes. They're following these programs. They're following these regimens that are passed down, and it's all about checking boxes. It's not about educating anybody. It's about getting the square peg to fit into the round hole. any way possible. And if it doesn't, it's on the student. The diagnostician was, I can honestly say now, is a boomer and didn't want she was told by the superintendent, who was her boss and was also a boomer. The diagnostician also left out some important information in our child's IEP, which left out our child with no protections in the classroom. The diagnostician since retired from the school district and went on to work at a mental health office in another town, which I think is comical. At the end of the year, we requested dyslexia evaluation since our child was not reading whatsoever, and they gaslighted us and telling us that dyslexia is not part of the law. So our child went 2 years with no intervention in reading or writing, but had an IEP. The young teacher requested extended school year under the IEP and was shot down by the diagnostician without committee discussion and did not provide a denial in writing for either request. At the end of the year's awards ceremony, our child got nothing, and she was completely rude about it by just pushing our child to us when the final bell rung. Second grade rolled around, and here's the tip of narcissism that goes in our schools. Again, our child had another young female teacher who now I know for 100% sure that she is borderline, because she gave me a dirty look once for no reason and also gave one to our child as well. I told him to let it roll off because it wasn't worth it getting into an argument with these people. The school had hired a new principal. Oh God, she was horrendous, and also another boomer, a younger boomer. We went up to her office to talk about what happened on the playground with our child and why our child came home with blood on the clothing. She popped off and said to blame shift our child by calling our child lazy in the classroom, but again, no IEP meeting was just called to discuss this fact. Also, she made it a fact to tell us she pulled his IEP paperwork from the filing cabinet. Well, we left that office and discussed with no resolution. Well, things were going all right until around wintertime after the holiday break and a bit before spring break. Our child came home quiet, and I knew something was wrong because it was a mess trying to get homework done. A note came home that the teachers wanted to have a meeting with us. We just got done burying my husband's mother. That is another story for another video, and things with us were still raw for the whole experience. Well, this boomer degenerate of a principal decided to pull our child out to work with reading, and she was so horribly mean to our child, who was only 7 years old at the time, made the poor kid cry for no reason and told him to dry up. She was not certified to teach special education, let alone our child. I requested yet again dyslexia evaluation, and she told us it wasn't covered under special education. The meeting ended with the special education teacher wanting to get behavior intervention going through consent, but told us if we wanted dyslexia testing, we would have to get it done out of pocket ourselves. This was the final straw, and I was pissed and filed a state complaint against the fact that they were denying our child intervention under special education. The principal thought was cute and decided to keep taking our child out of class and working with reading, and all she did was upset our child to the point where there was no longer a need to care about getting in trouble anymore, basically giving up. Well, that pissed me off, and my mama bear came out, and I went up to the school and filed a local complaint against her. You file complaints against. Now, here's the problem. You file complaints against these people, they're going to take it out on your children. This is the way it is. You complain, they're going to take it out on your children. During this situation, all the teacher had to say was, I am sorry to our child, but did nothing to stop the abuse. The special education teacher resigned at the end of the year because they blamed her for not working harder with our child when she wasn't certified to do dyslexia intervention. The principal also resigned as well but will be rehired again in a different position later on. The second grade borderline teacher is still teaching at the same school, and the first grade teacher left a few years ago. She was the one who won't allow our child to go use the bathroom. Well, now we're in the third grade, and our child is still struggling something bad with all academia. It took the school 2 months to do dyslexia and assistive technology evaluations and get the interventions and support in the paperwork. We have two borderline young female teachers. One of them came after me personally on social media, and of course the school protected her when she was in the wrong about our child needing compensatory services. The other borderline quit because she was abusing another student. Now the math teacher was great and worked with our child more than required. She ended up moving out of the area for a while. When we see her with her husband at church, and they are super nice, and she always says to our child that she is very proud of him. She is the first one to ever give a kind word to our child. During recess, our child broke 2 teeth on the fence at school, and nobody at school contacted us to make sure our child got medical or dental or even pay for the accident. Thankfully, we were smart enough to take out school accidental coverage at the beginning of the year. Years later, our child ended up having a root canal on those teeth. Well, the year went all right, but our child was still so far behind, and the school failed to provide the assistive tech, which ended up filing a complaint for wanting comm service and she said our child didn't need it, and was called out by our child's advocate and made her look freaking dumb. This reason right here is why she came after me, personally borderline. Well, summer was going great until we found out through a mutual friend that they brought back the horrendous principal and gave her the title of Dean of Students instead. I went up to the school and withdrew my child and started homeschooling the next year. We're done with all this BS. Now, homeschooling journey wasn't easy whatsoever, and we had to use our insurance, special needs grants, kindness of charities, and our church, and also out of pocket to get our child's needs met. Without therapies and sub-therapies, our child could not function as an adult now, because they just didn't want to deal with your child. They probably labeled your child as a disruptor, as a troublemaker, and they were doing everything they could to get you to remove the child from the school system. That's what was going on. What was still a shock to me today, and may piss some people off, is that we did a placement tests on our child to see where I needed to start academically, and I swear our child could barely read pre-K level and write, and could only do first grade math. Remind you, going in the fourth grade. In fourth grade, I had to start completely over in the first grade and teach fundamentals of reading, writing, and math. We homeschooled until our child graduated this past May with entry level in IT support, and now working on level 1. The school tried over the years to convince us to enroll as a student, especially since this last year when crap is collapsing so bad. Yeah, don't believe what the media says about how wonderful the schools are doing, because they aren't. We have a nationwide teacher shortage, and schools are going 4 days a week, so leaving parents to figure out who's going to keep their child while they work, another move by schools without parent input, isn't funding, and funding isn't the issue, with either just looking how much superintendents make that day. There isn't a teacher shortage. There isn't a teacher shortage. If there was a teacher shortage, there wouldn't be waiting lists to get these jobs. There isn't a teacher shortage. At least not here, and definitely not in New York and New Jersey, because I had to pay $8,000 to get my ex-wife her teaching job paid out to a headhunter, because it was impossible. It was nearly impossible to get those jobs up there. They just want more teachers because they're lazy, because they want to make these classes as small as possible, because the teachers are lazy. And it's much easier to indoctrinate smaller groups than it is larger groups. We just we heard just recently that Georgia is using AI to teach kindergarten. Homeschooling is legal in all 50 states. We also taught our child about the cultural shift and how it relates to the societal narcissism. 18 years old, and he points it out everywhere and got into a heated debate in Sunday school class, and one using examples out of the Bible. The ones that were debating more like arguing where they're in their early 30s. It was a young adult Sunday school class. My husband, who is a very religious man, said, "I'd never been a prouder father. Remember, our child is physically impaired and dyslexic." Thanks for the sponsorship, and hope you and Charlene are doing better now that you're out of that awful apartment. You are one of the channels I get so excited about when a new video is posted. My child used to hear your voice and Dr. Rami and Angie and Chico and all the prepper channels in the background while schoolwork was being done. Our child would say, "Oh, Ollie is tearing it up again." It was a piece of logic and psychological class that we won't get elsewhere. Take care, your friend, homeschool mom of one. Because and overall, like, look, the issue is these public schools are trying to jam square pegs into round holes. That's their only agenda. They're not trying to teach anybody. They're not trying to go the extra mile. Either you fit in or you don't. And if you don't fit in, if they need extra work, they're going to deem your child as a problem. Get your kids out of these schools. So I hope that helps. Thank you so much, Homeschool, for your story. Thank you to Caroline for sponsoring. I really appreciate it. Thank you to everybody watching. Please leave any opinions or advice in the comment section below. And again, if you want your story read on the channel, you have a topic you'd like me to cover, something you'd like to expose, you'd like to set up a Skype, a phone call, have a private video made, you'd like to sponsor a video like this for someone who needs help and can't afford it, or just make a contribution to the channel in general to keep it supporting, growing, and successful, because this channel survives 100% on contributions from all of you. Without you guys, all this goes away. So if you like what you see here and you want to see more videos like this, you know what to do with either the Cash App, Zelle, PayPal, and email links in the description box below. Also, please like and share this video wherever you can. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't, and be sure to click the subscription bell to be notified of all my video uploads. Also, be sure to follow both my Rumble channels. Follow me on Twitter and Telegram as well. I'm Ollie Matthews. This has been Societal Narcissism. Take care, everyone.